Okay, everyone, welcome back to another Sporting Blog podcast. It's one of those rare occasions where I've recorded one or two in the space of a day, having had a couple of weeks off, as ever. And we'd like to get into things, as you know, here, and sometimes controversial, sometimes not. Let's see if we can keep this one a little more sensible, but maybe throw in a dash of controversy at the end. So, um, I'm joined by James de Lacey, who is all right. James, hi. First of all, how's it going?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
So, James and I know each other from the digital publishing world, which is another story. But James has been involved in strength and conditioning all of his life, and has worked with the likes of the New Zealand All Blacks female team, the Romanian
Well,
rugby team,
the New Zealand Women's Rugby League team. So
rugby league.
yeah,
Sorry, well.
no, you're
I
good.
mean, well, they're
Similar.
they're harder than the other lot anyway, I think, aren't they?
Yeah,
So we've got someone with a good dose of experience in the field, and strength and conditioning is something that I think we hear about more in the pro sport world day after day now.
yeah.
And for our keen Premier League listeners, everyone knows this season has been the season of injuries following on from the Winter World Cup in November, the season before, and there's a record number of injuries this year, and there must be a reason for that. So anyway, first off, James, how talk us through your career, how you got into this, what you feel brought you into strength and conditioning in the first place?
Yeah, I graduated. I got my master's in sport and exercise science. Maybe I think it was around 10 years ago now. Started interning with our professional rugby league team, the Warriors in the NRL, for any rugby league fans. Did a
Hmm.
bunch of different stuff at different clubs, said yes to everything. Eventually landed my first full-time gig in Romania with a club team there. That was a bit of a shit show. Back to New Zealand, working with the New Zealand Women's Rugby League team for the Anzac Test and NRL Nines, which we won, which that was an awesome experience. And then to the USA to work with the Austin Major League Rugby team. So Major League Rugby is that new professional league here in the States. So I was here with the pilot year, then the first year, and then got the call up to join Romania Rugby for the 2019 World Cup, I think it was, but then signed the contract. Then they got disqualified before I got over there. So
Mm.
went over there anyway to help them prepare for the next World Cup. That was still a shit show. And then also did their Romania sevens to try qualify for the Olympics there. So that was all a good experience on that. COVID hit, ended up online and everything else. But like getting into strength conditioning was actually I don't you mentioned before the podcast you're playing tennis 5 days a week. That was like me. Tennis was my sport as well. Tennis and soccer back in the day. And I ended up having a knee injury when I must have been like 15 years old, 15 or 16, just like a meniscus injury that kind of took me out from most sport. And because I couldn't do any sport, I found myself in the gym, had a trainer, and then basically fell in love with it from there. I actually wanted to be a physiotherapist at the time. And then I didn't get into physiotherapy at uni. My grades weren't good enough, yeah, which was actually a blessing in disguise. So I was doing a course, I was doing like the main course that covers some of that physio stuff. And then we had a guest lecturer come into one of the classes in one of the first weeks, uh, Professor John Cronin, who heads up the university down in New Zealand. And he would start talking about sports science. And I was like, that's actually what I want to do. And then switched, and
Hmm.
then that's been it.
And that's how you got you in. So we did mention that before we started recording about the youth thing, which I was going to come on to later. But actually, let's start that before we get into pro sport, because I think with pro sport the applications are slightly clearer. But what we were talking about was that when you're young, and we'll discover what age one should start looking at this, but you kind of get told to play everything. I went to
Mm.
private school here in the UK, so it was like run cross country in the winter, keep running, just run and run and run. Every sport we did, football run, rugby run, squash, tennis run. And that was basically the full extent of the fitness program we were given.
Yeah.
Has that, in your mind, and being around pro sport and amateur sport, have you seen kids getting at least educated about how to prepare their bodies for sport at a younger age, or are we still behind the curve?
I think still slightly behind the curve, but there's definitely a push more. I mean, a lot of schools now are almost like professional body academies, right? Especially
Mm,
like outside of okay, in the US, yeah, because they've got high schools with gyms like bigger than any professional body sports team. But even outside the US, like in New Zealand and things, at college, which would be US high school, you have like full school gyms, full strength conditioning staff. Like it's literally like run like a professional side in those down through the grades. So it's kind of trickled its way in the academy way for the younger, I guess, athletes there. Outside of that, though, there's still obviously a lot of misconceptions around strength training, right? Like they shouldn't lift weights until they're X years old, or it's dangerous and this and that. But they can run into each other. That's fine. uh,
Yeah,
or just run endless miles, and that's fine. Yet the body isn't prepared or strong enough to handle that kind of stress. So it's uh it's a slow one that's making its way down. I think the professional sporting teams are somewhat helping that because they do have academies and bring kids in earlier. But yeah, it's still something that is definitely seen as, I guess you could say, taboo around
I
most
think
circles.
the 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 difference probably comes across in the different sports as well. I imagine in New
Yeah,
Zealand at school because of rugby, kids want to be bigger
yeah.
earlier, whereas here with football, I kids just want to kick the ball and play and play and play. Do you know what I mean? And you see even some of the Premier League academy kids that are coming through who start off underdeveloped and then they, you can see they work on building them, but really not until they're already sort of on the grass. What was it
Mm.
like at school in New Zealand in terms of that kind of like focus on getting big? Was that kind of a thing for people that, playing rugby? Was that, I mean,
But
obviously it's an added advantage, but
yeah, back when I was there, it was quite a while ago now. It wasn't so big. Now it's like a fully fledged program. So it's kind of evolved over the years. Like when I was there, yeah, there was a school gym and stuff, but there was no like the rugby team in there and the first 11 soccer team and everywhere else. Like there was no set strength training, I guess, team effort there until now, where it's like they have like a full-time strength and conditioning staff there with the gym, and the teams there are doing some form of like strength training as a specific session. Whereas in the
mm.
past, it was kind of like you kind of did it on your own if you were going to do it. So yeah, it's evolved pretty well.
And in your mind, whether it's for kids, amateurs, pros, and this is quite a multifaceted question, but is strength and conditioning first injury prevention, two performance enhancement, three recovery benefit? Like what do you see as the primary benefit of strength and conditioning, and then what comes underneath that?
It's all of it because they're not isolated things that you're training for. So when you're training to improve performance, you're also building resilience to injury, and then you're also helping recover faster, right? So like typically athletes who are stronger, there's some good research showing stronger athletes typically can handle higher workloads in training. They also uh, don't perceive training as hard. The ones that
Mhm.
are stronger, obviously, there's uh to an extent of being strong as well, because you're trying to hit powerlifting world records. Yeah, there's going to take away from something else. And then in terms of like injury prevention, like I usually just I like to call it reducing the risk of injury, because we can't prevent injuries. There's nothing you can do in the gym or in strength and conditioning to prevent injuries. You can reduce the risk potentially, but a lot of the time injuries aren't from like a certain training method or something like that. It's usually from doing too much work, too much, or like a training load that is too high that the athlete cannot handle, and then eventually they break and something happens. And no amount of band external rotations and ankle whatever band stuff and bird dogs and stuff are going to stop you from whatever that injury that could potentially happen when you're being pounded with 2-hour training sessions and having to do other things.
Yeah, and I think we see in pro sport, obviously, the strength and conditioning departments. I mean, I reference Premier League football a lot because at the moment it's so topical, the amount of injuries there are. And actually, even the medical departments are now becoming scrutinized on social and even in the press as to what they're doing in between game time. But it's so pervasive now, especially hamstring injuries and things like this,
Yeah.
that it's obviously no one thing that anyone's doing, but as you referred to, it's probably the overall workload that these guys and girls are being put through, that's causing the kind of rush of
Mm.
injuries we're seeing now.
Well,
Um,
soccer is like huge. They're playing like sometimes 2-3 times a week, and
yeah,
then the preseasons they're having are very short. So guys are probably coming in from holiday straight to the gym, and then they're playing straight away. No, I mean, the NFL has exactly the same problem. Like it's play like I think a lot of it's driven by players associations. I don't know if Premier League Soccer has a players association like that, but they drive a lot of the schedule, and that's a big issue because guys are coming in undercooked and then they're going straight out into intense games, and it's like, well, no wonder there's injuries on top of that. Um, I will say this is a very big generalization, but I've seen like a lot of soccer strength and conditioning is also kind of rubbish. That's obviously not a dig on anyone in particular or anything, but just some of the stuff you can find into and some stuff I've seen personally around Europe when I was there. It's a lot of it is, I guess you could say, they try and make it quote unquote functional,
Hmm.
balancing on stuff and doing weird things versus a sound approach to, getting stronger or targeting certain qualities versus trying to make something that looks like soccer as an example. So there's also that culture there in soccer that, a lot of players are allergic to the gym in soccer, they want to go just be outside and play. So that's also another problem, but I don't think that is the main problem, at least at the professional level. It's the scheduling, and the scheduling is brutal.
Yeah, and the especially here in the UK, you've got several different world bodies pulling players in different directions, from European football to Premier League football to
Yeah.
international football, and they obviously don't want to say no to any of it. Um, but as we've seen, Jurgen Klopp and others have been campaigning for years for a winter break in the Premier League, like they have in Germany, to at least give the players 3 or 4 weeks off for some recovery time. It's not going to happen anytime soon. There's too much money involved.
Yeah.
Um, the other issue, I guess, with football or soccer is that the the type of the type of turning that the players do in molded studs on varying surfaces when
Yeah.
they're also running 11, 12 kilometers on average a game, slow, fast, is it's a lot. You wouldn't do that in any other world, right? You wouldn't naturally jog for 2 minutes, then sprint, then turn around, then fall over, then jump. Like it's just an unnatural thing, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of like mechanical stress, like on joints and muscles and things like that. And yeah, the different surfaces definitely plays a role in some of that. I remember when we in Romania would have to uh deal with that too. So like we'll be up at training camp, it would be like snowing crazy. So we might be on turf one day, then we'll be on grass one day, but then we might play on grass or turf that weekend. Then players pull up like super sore from the
Yeah.
different surfaces all the time. And then you got to manage that within training to still give them what they need, but also not blow them up on top of that. So it becomes a little juggling act when you got all the different services as well. So yeah, I mean they're trying to make, what's it, 3G pitches or 4G pitches, whatever they call them now, whatever number they're up to, to make them more like natural grass. But they'll probably be, if everything was natural grass, it would probably be better off. But yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I remember last this season in the NFL in London games, the Buffalo Bills team
Mm,
complained bitterly about the surface at the Tottenham Stadium, which is an Astro. I think we would call it 4G. Um, and then yet the grass surface there, which slides together over the top of the Astro, you see players slipping on it every week, and that's supposed to be 95% real grass interwoven with plastic. But I think the point is that because the players go through so many different surfaces and different stresses, it's just always going to lead to trouble. The
mm.
interesting one for me, though, is I never used to have as much sympathy as I do now for footballers because of tennis. Well, and I see Rafa Nadal and Djokovic play a 6.5 hour Australian Open final or something.
Mm.
And anyone that's played tennis knows that it hurts your back and your knees and all of this to keep serving over and over and over again for hours and hours. How those guys do it, I do not know. To win a Grand Slam on clay or hard court and play seven, 3, 4 hour matches in the space of 10 days is insane.
It is
And
insane.
then to play the next week probably as well.
I'm pretty sure they're on stuff too, because they're not governed by WADA. I think they have
Well,
their own doping rules.
we'll come on to this because in my mind, there's not a single professional sport where they aren't on stuff, but I've always had that view. And I think we all kind of know this deep down, but there are some
Mm,
sports like Premier League football that just completely feel like they're shielded from it, like they couldn't possibly be on drugs. Like they are,
yeah.
believe me. But before we start accusing everyone of doping, um, what about in amateur sport then? So, you, me, anyone else, we obviously, well, not everyone goes to the gym, but I like to use the gym, but I never really used it to improve my sport. Like when I was playing cricket, I didn't go to the gym to bowl quicker. I kind of
Just
went
trying to
because
get
I wanted.
massive.
just I wanted a bigger back or whatever. But now,
Yeah.
as you get older, you think, shit, if I had gone to the gym and done some exercises regarding bowling my back, I might have been able to bowl a bit better. What do you think, in general, how can people approach strength and conditioning for the games they play? Because otherwise everyone's going to be doing bro splits and
Yeah.
4-day body part stuff. What's the basic advice here?
The basic advice is to incorporate some form of jumps, throws, plyometrics, potentially sprints, depending on whatever it is you're doing within your training program, because they're the ones that get left out. And if anyone's searching for training programs online to do in the gym for whatever reason, those are the things often missing. You can also get on the road if you wanted to touch on all the different movement patterns like push, pull, squat, hinge, rotate, lunge, carry. As an example, that can be a foundation thing. But I typically like for sport, particularly, I like to think about it as what they would call a vertically integrated approach. So you're going to touch on all the qualities within the training week, regardless of what the focus is. So even if you're trying to get bigger, you're still going to do some form of jumps, throws, or plyometrics or whatever, just lower volumes of it. Or if you're trying to become faster, more powerful, and you're not trying to build as much muscle mass, then you'll just reverse that, as an example. But in saying that, it doesn't mean you suddenly go, okay, James said to do some jumps and plyometrics now. So I'm going to go do 5 sets of box jumps and I'm going to go jump off these stairs onto something else, do some crazy depth jumps and everything else. You'll blow yourself up. It's the same like you're lifting. You're not going to go and start just lifting 90% of your 1RM from day one. You're going to probably work your way up to it. So within jumps and plyometrics, you can start with extensive or known as sub-maximal reps. I like to do that in a circuit form. So typically a jump plyometric circuit might be a very simple one, would be something like squat jumps. So you're just going up and down, or jump squats, if you want to call them that, just 10 of those. It's not maximal, it's just smooth and rhythmic. Then you might be doing some ankle pogos or ankle pops, 20 of those. Then you might do lateral squat jumps, 10 of those. And you might do ankle pops going forward, 20. And then you can even repeat the jump squat, or you can do some kind of some other jump in there. You can do a single leg, lunge jump, whatever, and then ankle pops going backwards. And that would be one circuit. Rest, you can do that twice, 3 times, 4 times, whatever it is. And that way you can do that, build the volume, and you prepare your body to be able to handle more intense jumping and plyometric variations so you don't blow yourself up. Another cool method for developing that kind of work capacity is Vern Gambetta's leg circuit. And it's pretty popular within professional sport now. It's essentially you work your way to, it's the goddamn hardest circuit in the world. I still haven't completed it. It's like 20 body weight squats and you're doing 1 a second. Then you're doing 20 lunges, 20 step ups, and then you're doing 10 jump squats, 5 rounds, no rest. Dude, it is the hardest fucking thing you'll do in your life.
Yeah, that
And
sounds like some Navy SEAL shit because the truth is, like, I think actually that's an interest. Well, both of those are interesting, of course, but
mm,
um, this is where you start to realize the a true strength and conditioning program, the conditioning aspect, right? Because the cardio load there is big too,
yep,
right? You're going to
it's
be
a pure work
blowing,
capacity circuit.
you're going to be blowing like a fucking whale. And frankly, for people like me that just go in and like sort of lift stuff and don't really tax the heart too much, I think this is where you kind of step up a level, right? And actually,
Mm,
again, if many of us had been doing this stuff when we were in our early 20s, still playing amateur sport to a level, we would have seen the benefits. And especially sprinting. I totally agree with
yeah,
that. It's something that all you do is you sprint when you play something and then you never sprint again.
yeah.
It's crazy. We go into a gym on a running machine and kind of plod away when actually we should be looking to sprint. And I think those pretty good advice. Have you got anything on any of your sites that people can check out in terms of programs or advice anywhere that they should have a look? If I can put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I've got sweetscienceoffighting.com that has that's all geared towards combat sports, and it has a lot of that stuff in there regarding work capacity and stuff. In terms of actual strength conditioning for other sports, I don't. Most of my other stuff is geared towards kind of strength sports and stuff like that on a different website. I think maybe one day I'll start to potentially release some like strength conditioning for other sports like rugby and stuff like that. Or maybe when I have the time in the future. But right now it's all geared towards combat sports, so it has a lot of those principles in there.
Sure. So um, that's pretty good from the amateur point of view. I think that the true lesson is that if you are listening and you are still a keen player of games, whatever game it is, that strength and conditioning work, and you can obviously Google and YouTube your own stuff, is only going to enhance your game.
Yeah.
I think we had this thing in the past where it was like, don't spend too much time in the gym, don't get too big, and also don't run too much because then you'll get small and like all this nonsense that people. Well, look, it's actually, do you know what? There's one of the great stories. I'll do it quick. In Major League Baseball, one of the greatest ever pitchers, Pedro Martinez, I think when he went to the Expos when they were still around, or it may have been when he went from the Expos to the Red Sox. He's a very small, slight guy, only 5'9", I think, but could throw the ball almost 100 miles an hour. They wanted him to get bigger because they were worried about his
Mm.
arm blowing up, and they stopped him. They made him walk everywhere because they had this
Yeah.
thing that the more you move, the more you're going to lose your size. So they tried to big him up, and they told him not to run, to sit down all the time. And there's like these old things that like we pick up on, like you can't do any cardio if you're lifting weights because you're not going to get big. You're going to
Yeah.
use your calories up and all this shit. I mean, let's dispel a few myths right now. Actually, well, I'll let you dispel the myth. But how do you feel when, like, okay, so people that are maybe, let's say, do the bodybuilding type split would look at the
Yeah.
program you just said and shit themselves and think, my God, I'm not gonna be able to build my muscle mass. We obviously know this isn't true. Um, I mean, you know what? Actually, really, one should know that by looking at NFL players and rugby players, right? I mean,
Yep.
maybe they're juiced up, but they're huge and they run a lot every day. Um, how have you managed to kind of balance that with any of your clients or things, those people that kind of looking for a physique work, but also want strength and conditioning? Do they have that kind of concern? Do you have to persuade them a little bit, or what can you do to persuade them?
I think the best example is what you mentioned there. Like people will talk about you can't do quote unquote cardio and lifting together because the interference effect or the concurrent training effect. But as you mentioned, like CrossFitters, rugby player, any team sport athlete is doing concurrent training every damn day. Like sometimes we'd have 3 trainings a day. Often would be in the gym, then straight out into the field, things like that. Yet, they're able to continually building muscle or maintain size or get stronger, etc. And there's a good meta-analysis that was released, I think, or published 2021, 2022, showing the interference effect isn't that big of a deal as we once thought it was. Regarding people with physique goals, typically it kind of just depends what they want. Like often, if they don't like doing, I don't know, other cardio things, just walking is more than enough for now. If they really enjoy, like, hey, I really like to go do swimming and this and that and this and that, that can that can suffice. That is fine. Typically, most people don't like, because I wouldn't force someone to be like, you have to go do you know, some hard training circuit cardio thing while you're training 4 times a week on like an upper lower split or something. It just doesn't make any sense. Like if they want or they already have somewhat of an active lifestyle, cool. If they don't, hey, just make sure you're walking, at least frequently just to maintain some general work capacity. You can also just build it into the program, as I mentioned before. Like if you're going through various blocks of it, you can do some kind of work capacity block in the beginning that involves maybe a few more reps and maybe a little less rest, or maybe more circuit style just initially to build kind of a little bit of that base. There's a billion different ways of doing it there that can still help them reach, whatever it's with that goal, and will still benefit them further down the line, instead of just kind of cutting something out completely.
Mhm. You mentioned the CrossFit there. Now, for people that are unfamiliar with CrossFit, you can Google it, but it's essentially, well, it's kind of a cult, but at the same time, it's also extremely taxing, challenging, or it can be at least. Well, first off,
Mhm.
what's your opinion on CrossFit, James? Because it does, a lot of the things you mentioned today are CrossFit side of things as well. But what do you think of CrossFit?
In terms of for like using it for sports performance or just generally?
I think in terms of, because okay, like, so there's a couple of CrossFit gyms near us, and there are people
Yeah.
who I know that use it, and I would suggest that they are not the right type of physical shape to be doing this stuff. And there are others who use it who I would say are absolutely made for it, and those are probably the more athletic types.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I have a sort of opinion on it. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So I'll touch on both. For sports performance, no. CrossFit should not be done. CrossFit should not even be touched for sports performance. Doesn't make any sense. You're just throwing a random bunch of shit at the wall and just doing stuff until you can't move on the floor. Uh, generally, like Yeah, I mean, people can kind of choose what they want to do. I think that the biggest draw of CrossFit is the community factor, right? Like people go there because
Mm,
they get to work out with other people, talk with other people, other like-minded people, do something hard together, and then they kind of bonds them there. So, if they want to do that, I mean, sure, there's probably going to be injuries coming along with that with people who are not ready. I think maybe, well, I'm not going to generalize, but maybe some CrossFit gyms are getting better with like scaling their sessions for people who, don't have that kind of background to make it easier for them. But yeah, there's always the risk. And if someone enjoys doing that, sure, they can go ahead at, they're being active in there and joining something. But yeah, for sports performance, yeah, avoid at all costs.
It has that strange thing. Like I've watched some of the Netflix documentaries, and there is that strange thing, as you say, like, until you're dead on the floor. I mean, that's the sort of the weird badge of honor that they kind of wear. And the worry for me is, especially with younger people or even older people, to go into a thing. And I know they don't just throw you in right at the deep end, but jerks aren't for everyone.
Yeah.
Not everyone has the mobility to lift something above their head like 10 times in a row and then like slap hands with the chalk dust going everywhere and then die on the floor. Like it's just, well, it's brutal, like at the end of the day, or it can be. And I know, again, I'm generalizing, but a lot of the things that you mentioned, like the squat jumps and all that, those things they tie into CrossFit, but it does seem to be this sort of mad challenge thing. And I just urge anyone that's looking into CrossFit to just make sure that they know what they're getting into before they start,
Yeah.
because
I
it's
mean,
it's
one of the things is as well is like you don't want to associate it like a good session being you're absolutely fucked at the end of it, right? Like
exactly,
your session should have a goal in mind. Like a lot of the times you should feel just good after your session and ready to do something else. And if you feel that way, it's a good one. You should obviously every now and then there will be times where you'll just absolutely be obliterated, which would be planned within your program. But most of the time, or 80-90% of the time, you'll be just literally doing the work to do the work. And then that consistency is what builds whatever it is you're trying to do over years versus trying to have that one or two amazing workout that you have where you're just absolutely dead because that can set you back further uh, than you like.
yeah, definitely. I've learned that lesson myself in the past when you're younger, is trying to, well, you try and like to the point that you do so many reps that you can't open the door of the gym and you think, "Well, that's it,
Yep.
and then, for 3 weeks you can't do anything else, and like your shoulders are burning all the time because your rotators are all wrecked. And yeah, I still live that world quite a bit. Um, so CrossFit was one of those things, funny enough, I was going to touch on as something that's really relatively new. I mean, it's been around for a while, but in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of new.
Mm.
There's plenty of different programmatic type things that people can get into now for strength and conditioning. But where do you think the future lies for the woman and man in the street with regards to this stuff? Do you think it's about education? Do you think people need to have online coaching? Do you think we should all invest a bit more in our health and fitness and stop looking at Instagram people and wanting to do what they do? Like, where do you think the future lies with this? Because obviously, like, we've both got kids. Like, I know what
Mm.
I tell my kids about exercise, but it's mainly about uh, life lengthening. You should
Yeah.
exercise because it's good for you. But where do you think the future is in strength and conditioning?
There's in the general public, strength training is definitely becoming more popular. I mean, I still remember back in the day, like going to the gym was just going to the gym. Now, bloody everyone and their bloody dog is at the gym for some kind of fitness journey or Instagram or something. It's like blowing up into this like trendy. It's a trendy thing to do now, right? Compared to when it was back in the day. Like back in the day,
Sure.
it's just like, go to the gym, whatever, or you're just like some gym bro or whatever. And now it's seen as like a positive thing. So I mean, that's a good thing. Uh, Regarding with coaching, yeah, it's a tough one because anyone and everyone is now an online coach or a coach, and they do a coaching. I say this often now. It's like people think you can just go do a certification and now you're suddenly a coach, or a degree and you're a coach. But coaching is not a certification or a degree. It's not a job. It's a profession, and it's something that you learn by doing it yourself and by coaching other people. And that's the only way you do it. You can have no certification. I have no certifications. In fact, I've never had a certification. And I've worked in professional international sport. I mean, I've got my master's degree, but to me, a certification made no sense. I'm not going to sit there and get certified for some bullshit course that's going to fucking teach me nothing. I don't give a shit about that. I'm going to be on the ground coaching people and talking to other coaches and applying things and learning. And learn from myself that I can apply as well. And that is where the real art of coaching comes versus doing certifications and courses. And obviously, the latest person who just did an 8 week lost weight in 8 weeks, now they've become a coach as well, things like that. And it's crazy. Like everyone's just selling crazy coaching packages with that stuff. So if you're looking for coaching, you got to be careful with where you're kind of looking, and I guess finding a coach that's at least reputable and kind of knows what they're doing versus someone who's just got the results for themselves, because you don't know how they got those results either. Because I mean, you now have Ozempic, you have all your testosterone that can be mailed to your door. It's pretty easy to just get in shape and then throw yourself on Instagram now.
But
So
it
yeah,
is
got to
it
be
is a
careful.
thing though. Like for me, like when, as you say, when I was younger anyway, the gym was something you either did once a week, or if you did, you're a bit weird that you weren't in the pub but you were going to the gym. There's something wrong with you.
Yeah,
But it's
yeah,
funny, like if you said to a 40-year-old person now you want to get into tennis, the first thing they'd probably do is say, I'm going to have lessons because I need to
mm,
know how to do this. But I think with the gym and strength and conditioning, people are like, well, I can do it myself because I'll just look online.
yeah,
And I actually think that there should be a happy medium somewhere because truly, and you only know this when you get older, without proper form, all of this stuff is not as effective as it should be. And I wonder with we should try and normalize the fact that people should learn before they, before they run into it.
yeah. No, I think so. And at least just learning some of the stuff, like some things in that you just have to figure out for yourself. Like some things you just have to make mistakes with and figure out yourself. And I think at least learning the basics of technique for a lot of things, and then just figuring things out for yourself from there, that's all good. Because uh there's at some point, I think, in your lifting career, and it could be even in your strength and conditioning career for sport, at some point in your life, I think you just have to do dumb, crazy, stupid shit. And that's like what we mean. Like you're on the floor dead after every session for however long. You're doing stupid, crazy volume of body part splits or whatever it is. Something just stupid. And I think, I don't know what, just a random thought and theory that I have, but I just think like at some point that kind of sets like a volume base or foundation that you can now handle kind of
Mm.
anything else. And especially if you start to get into a strength conditioning program that is I guess better written and organized. It's going to be slightly lower volume anyway. Yes, you'll have the intent in there, but you're not going to be so beat up for something like that because you've got a background of just doing fucking dumb shit part of the
Mm.
time.
Yeah.
So I think there is something to it, and there's just the ability to know kind of where you can push to. So there is some value in that, but obviously that's not something you want to be doing for years and years and years and years, and that's all you do. At some point you'll progress, but yeah, I think having some fun and just doing some stuff like that, I think has some value. At some point, you figure things out yourself.
Oh, definitely. And I think also like we can all learn a little bit from strongman in a way. Like
Hmm.
sometimes lifting something really heavy off the ground and putting it back down, like that plays a role as well if you do it properly. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't need to be a car or a log, but the very act of doing that might not follow every form and technical guide. But if you walk a long time carrying something heavy, it's going to benefit you one way or another.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so before we let you go, we mentioned it in places, but it's a bit of a topic of mine, and actually on this podcast in the past, I've thrown in the PED
Mm,
thing. And my theory has always largely been, especially in the 90s and 2000s, when there were steroid scandals in baseball, NFL, NHL, um, when contracts are so big and you only get 10 years roughly playing a game, if something's going to give you an advantage, it's going to get you the contract over the person next to you who is also maybe using something, you're going to do it, I think, because you just are. And I can't believe that it's only NFL, MLB, and NHL that have this problem, right? And rugby players, if we've watched the Rugby Union World Cup recently, the size of the centers and the wingers now is just getting out of hand, frankly. And we actually had a Sam Peters who wrote the book Concussed, which was out a few months
mm,
ago about concussion in rugby on the podcast a few weeks ago. And he said the collisions now are beyond where the game was ever meant to be played. Rugby wasn't meant to be a game where people are car crashing into each other like this. Not originally. It's turned into that.
mm.
Is it possible to be that big, that fast, and run around for 80 minutes without some sort of chemical assistance?
Some guys, yes. There are definitely some that, especially with us, the island genes.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is, I mean, this South Africa has a known doping culture through school. In rugby, uh, Olympic weightlifting has a big doping culture. If anyone's interested, if you go into usada.org /sanctions, I think it lists all the positive drug tests that have come out that USADA tests for in the States, and you'll find a whole load of UFC fighters that have been popped that they just, because they only fight once or twice a year, the 6 month ban never gets put out. Like,
Well, look at the
uh,
size of Conor McGregor now. Conor McGregor's
oh
got
yeah.
such bloat face from the GH and everything else. It's ridiculous. Even Paddy Pimble, whatever his name is, he's the
Yep.
same. Like, anyway,
Yeah, and then I mean Sugar Sean O'Malley, I think it was last year, he had a 6 month ban. As soon as the 6 month ban was up, he was already fighting again. Like hardcore promotion in the UFC, like they don't care. Um, but yeah, it's definitely rampant in a lot of sports. Um, and I mean some guys can compete naturally, but I mean, take for example, the funniest one is Usain Bolt, right?
yeah.
Everyone sees him, but he's like the poster child of the 100 of track and field, so they'll never catch him out. But every person who's run under 10 seconds has been popped except for Usain Bolt. It's like,
And his entire team,
and his
the
entire
team
team,
that he
but not
ran
him,
with.
not him. He's
Well,
the
and
he's the
again, so
natty one.
yeah, right. But steroid use in Jamaica is rampant, right?
Yeah,
At the young level for young sprinters. And there's no more obvious a sport than track for use.
yeah,
I agree with you to some extent. There are freaks of nature out there, but
yeah.
it's very difficult for an 18 stone or whatever you want to call it, 250 pound, 260 pound human of any stature to run around for an hour and a half whilst getting hit and then do it all again a week later. I mean, it's pretty insane.
It is insane.
Um,
But they are full-time athletes. They have all the staff at their disposal. You know, everything's kind of tracked through every different stuff, GPS metrics, training loads. You have recovery things all in place. Like you have your
sure.
nutrition sorted. You have it. They have advantages over the general person for sure. But yeah, I mean, as always in every sport, there's always someone who's taking or not taking. I think rugby union as well, because it's the ball and play time so short. There's so much stop start. That's why you're obviously position dependent too. But you're such big guys. You look at rugby league now, since all their rule changes around substitutions and speeding the game up. Like those guys have gotten so much smaller. You don't have the big
Mm,
props anymore. You
mm.
don't have the guys with these huge legs running around. Everyone's kind of trimmed right down because the game is just so fast. The ball's never out of play. So it's completely changed the physiques for that sport.
The one that's always got me is boxing because
Yeah.
there's no human that should look like Anthony Joshua looks. Like I know there's genes and all the rest of it, but the amount of training they do, the amount
Mm.
of workload they got through, and yet they are ripped beyond belief and still carrying all the size. Yet the amount of kind of just to what we touched on earlier, the amount of running work, cardio, it's not normal to be that huge. And it's I don't know, like I just
Well, you
can't.
think you think you think Saudi Arabia is going to stop $100 million fight because a little bit of poking of the needle? Hell no.
No, but the argument is, and the Joe Rogan argument is, let them have at it. Let them all go. Let them become these freak athletes that they need to be. Do it under supervision so they're not going to put their hearts under stress. And let's see truly what human endeavor can look like. But this is what, so the guy that blew the whistle on all of it in the States, Jose Canseco, did it with the baseball with his book Juiced. And he
Mm,
fucking name checked all of them. And his argument all the way along is we're all doing it. Let us go. You'll see the ball hit further. We'll run faster. We'll throw the ball harder. It's a much better game. But if you do it properly, we'll all do it under supervision. And of course, they were like, oh my God, you can't because Babe Ruth never did and all the rest of it. Maybe he's got a point. Why don't we just let them all go crazy on it and let's see how fast a human really can run?
yeah, I will say is like, so my wife was a elite level weightlifter, professional weightlifter. She was for the last Olympics, she at one point she was number 7 in the world in a weight class, full natural for number 7 in the world. And it gets to a point where, some people don't want to risk their health to do that and would, don't want to do it with that kind of assistance. Then with that, with people who are doping, they take a lot of spots and medals from natural individuals that are now
Yeah.
didn't get the endorsement. So obviously, Mona has my wife has a lot of friends in that space that came second or third, And years later, they get a gold medal because someone was popped. But that person who got that gold medal already had the big bonus, the car, the house, the
Absolutely.
sponsorships, you know? It's
On the way
it's a hard one.
on the way back from the gym this evening, on the way here, I was listening to the boxer Anthony Yard on the radio, who has lost twice in his career. Both times he's lost to people who then got found to have adverse things in their system. They've already taken the check home. They've already
Yep.
got the win on their thing. None of them are getting no contest, by the way, because the second test comes out okay. And he's like, I lost the last fight on a split decision, and the guy, and he wasn't tired at the end, and I was tired. It's that tiny, that tiny difference, as you say. It's already in the book.
Mm.
They've already won. Um, so I look. There's other sports where it's been completely an epidemic, like in cycling, where if you're not, you can't. Well, you
Yeah,
can't compete, right? It's
correct.
impossible for you to do it naturally because the rest of the Tour de France field, all how many hundreds of them there are, they're all on.
Yeah,
And it's probably the same with sprinting, right? Usain Bolt probably didn't have a choice because everyone's on it, so we all do it
yeah,
or not.
for sure.
As
Well, in a lot of these Eastern Bloc countries, so obviously living in Romania, you get to know a few things like I mean, they have a whole state sponsored doping program, right? With their weightlifting team. So if you go into national training camp, you get selected for that, you're doped up in there. And basically you go back to the club, maybe you're not, but you go to training camp, you're in there training. You live in a so we would go up to a facility called Snagov, it's about 45 minutes out of Bucharest. And we would go there for like rugby camp, for example, before we had to play or go somewhere. But that's also where a lot of the Olympic athletes would live. So it's like semi-isolated. It's like, I don't know how you call it. Basically, it has gyms and river for the rowers, and it has training facilities there, and they all live there. They all eat there, and they all train there. And all they do is eat, sleep, train there. That's it. And it's pretty isolated. So at the front of the gate is the security thing. So someone comes in to turn up, the security person's there to tell whoever is coming in. And so we were talking to one of the weightlifters who was on the national team there. He said they used to just hide when the dope tests would come. They'd literally hide, or they'll get doppelgangers, or like just
Jeez.
crazy shit like that. They'd literally just hide from the dope testers and not be there. And yeah, that's pretty crazy. Like a lot of these, but you understand, like in those countries, it's often a way out of poverty,
All right.
out of poorness, or because they all come from a communist regime, you get paid for life for medals. So it's not like, oh, I compete for the country, I get paid some money, and then I'm done. It's you win a medal, you get €1,000 a month for life. You win a medal here, you get this month for life. So you're setting
Mm.
yourself up every time you win a medal, a world championship, a national championship, whatever, and then you'll see you're making €3,000 a month, which is like 6, 7 times the minimum wage every month uh, for the rest of your life, and you don't have to work. There was some old guys from, I think it was the 1980 something rugby team. I think it must have been the first Romanian rugby team. I think they beat France in some competition. I can't remember what it was. They don't work. Those guys would just like literally turn up to our trainings and watch half the time in the middle of the day because of the stipend they've had for life since then from being rewarded from it. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and I don't doubt for a minute that this is the same case for a lot of kids at high school in America. That the chance, the minuscule chance, the 1% chance of 1% of 1%, you might make it professional in American football or basketball. Like
Yeah,
it's too big an opportunity if you know that something's going to give you the edge. You're going to jump
yeah,
a bit faster, you're going to sprint, whatever. Like I don't doubt that for a minute. The bit I actually like less and have less time for are Instagram influencers, bodybuilding type influencers
yeah,
who are clearly and without doubt using something and then making kids feel like it's an achievable thing, and then it's obviously not, and then they have to look around. Like one of my gyms here is rampant with it, and all the kids are like clearly fucking spotty like crazy, and but it's sad, it's fucking sad.
yeah. And they probably will have broccoli haircuts too on top of that.
Yeah,
With
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's yeah, it's become more acceptable now almost to just get on the gear, and people will get on like instantly. Like they go to the gym and they start gear, and it's like, dude, you've never even been training, and now you're just suddenly taking gear, and then if they're not on gear, they're not going to train. And it's just like they've never learned how to progress without it. It's just taking it, get big, cool, and then if they come off or whatever it is, they lose all their gains, and then they kind of just lose any will to kind of go to the gym unless they're on it. And yeah, it is a problem that has become more acceptable in a way. I mean, it's good for people who are diagnosed low testosterone and need it, but outside of that, like, it's pretty it's pretty rampant in many gyms.
I just found it annoying that the YouTube fitness community sort of turned it into a, well, let's roast this guy because he's clearly not natural. So let's, and it almost becomes a bit of a joke when actually like people like brands like Gymshark have made their fortune off the back of showing performance enhanced humans, female and male, and presented that to people like me, or buy the t-shirt because she looks amazing and he looks amazing, when the physiques those people own are not achievable to people like me unless we're chemically assisted. That's what bugs me. These are big brands now.
Yeah,
Like, it's not just like, Tim at the gym who's like a meathead. It's
yeah,
pervasive into all of our lives.
yeah. The problem is now, obviously, you can't go back, right? You can't just put an average physique up in your clothes. Who's going to buy that shit?
Yeah.
You know? So it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy now. Like, they have to go with that look, photoshopped, juiced, all that kind of stuff. Otherwise, if you don't look impressive enough for someone to stop scrolling and be like, whoa, I want to look like that. Who's going to care about your brand and everything else? It's the same thing with, a lot of the coaches that have shown their own transformations and things, but they don't tell you they got on TRT and
Yeah.
suddenly, made all these changes.
Yeah. I suppose it's also been pretty rampant in Hollywood for years and years, right? I mean,
Oh yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
these guys are ridiculous, and 50-year-old guys like with this unbelievable skin and no wrinkles, and it's not just makeup. Uh,
And then getting on the gear for different roles, adding like how much
yeah,
muscle and getting jacked for different roles, but then they're not allowed to say like it's not even like a drug tested sport, but they still can't say they use juice to get there. Like it's crazy to me.
there are some very big, medium-sized actors, put it that way. Right, before we get into full conspiracy, let's wrap it up. James, thanks a lot. It's been super interesting. Do you want to tell everyone what you're up to at the moment, where they can find you, where they can talk to you about strength and conditioning or anything like this?
Yeah, check out sweetscienceoffighting.com. That also has a YouTube channel, podcast, all the bits and bobs there. You can also, if you're more on the strength sports, physique stuff, liftbigeatbig.com is my other website. That's more strength sports, physique style programs and things like that, gym equipment, etc. So those are the two main places you can probably find me. Yeah, the socials, YouTube, websites, all of it, you'll find it.
Cool. Well, look, it's been fun chat, and maybe we'll do it again one day over a beer, and then we can really rip professional sport a new one when it comes to PD. All right, mate. Thanks very much. Have a good evening, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Perfect. Cheers, Ollie. Appreciate it.